Hi everyone, in today's module we will deal with some very important topics, that of the spiral of violence and that of stereotypes. We will use a PowerPoint presentation as usual and start with the Istanbul Convention, which we already seen together in previous modules. So let's start. The term violence against women is intended to designate a violation of human rights and a form of discrimination against women, including all acts of gender-based violence that cause or are likely to cause harm or suffering of physical, sexual, psychological, or economic violence, including threats to carry out such acts of coercion or arbitrary deprivation of liberty, whether in public or private life. The term domestic violence refers to all acts of physical, sexual, psychological, or economic violence occurring within the family or household or between current or former spouses or partners, regardless of whether the abuser shares or has shared the same residence with the victim. The term gender-based violence against women refers to any violence directed against a woman as such or that disproportionately affects women. Violence is a cultural phenomenon. For centuries, domestic violence has been considered a private, family-related topic. Conjugal violence was considered at most an excess of jus corrigendi, the legitimate power of the husband to exercise over the woman, daughter, or mother to redeem or educate her, at the root of which remains the conception of ownership of a body for reproductive purposes. It's the battles of the women's movement that have brought violence to the public stage, redefining its meanings and forcing it to become a political issue. But what is gender equality? It means fundamental equality, rights, and access to opportunities. So we can talk about equal opportunities. And what is a stereotype? A stereotype is a cultural cage, a prejudgment. How do we transmit gender stereotypes? We do it through literature, history, art. And in this example, we have a sentence from the Odyssey. Come on, go back to your rooms and think of your works, loom and spindle, and command the handmaids to look after the work. To the bow will all men think, and die above all, mine here at home is the command. Aristotle in his Politica states that woman cannot raise her mental faculties to the level of a man, but she remains equal to a slave, because her nature doesn't allow her to do that. And according to Plato, women would be a reincarnation of inferior men. And from yesterday to today, it's always a matter of shoes. Maybe you already know something about red shoes. In 2009, the artist Elena Chauvet staged her first art installation of red shoes representing the bloodshed women face in Mexico because of femicide, domestic, and sexualized violence. In this sculpture, here you have the muse and the faun, where the muse is trying to protect herself with a shoe. And here again, in these two sculptures, the story, the myth of Persephone and Hades. Hades was a rich and powerful god, and much feared because he was the lord of the underworld populated by the shadows of the dead. For this reason, every maiden or goddess was horrified at the idea of becoming ruler of a kingdom where the sun never shone. One day, therefore, Hades decided to go up to Earth and not return to his own kingdom until he had found a wife. And he kidnapped the nymph Persephone. Demeter, who was the mother of Persephone, was very, very angry. Demeter's anger was huge. She no longer wanted to ascend Olympus with the other gods. She no longer wanted to listen men's prayers, and she cursed to earth, making it unproductive and sterile. Zeus, then, concerned about the fate of mankind, sent his messenger to Hades. At first, Hades didn't want to know about sending Persephone back to Earth, but in the end, Zeus will overcome all resistance. Persephone would remain in the kingdom of shadows for 6 months and for the other 6 on Earth with her mother Demeter. This is the first historical attempt at reconciliation. Here you can see the myth of Daphne and Apollo in this sculpture. The troubled story between Apollo and Daphne, who, in order to escape from the god, turned herself into a laurel plant. She, being a nymph who loved her freedom, didn't want to submit to the god's will. So, after the moment of declaration, she started to run away quickly so as not to be caught. As she fled, she asked Mother Artegia for help so that she would not fall into the hands of Apollo. Gia accepted a request and transformed her into a beautiful laurel tree, separating the two forever. And in this other page, you can see and study how stereotypes become rules of life in 1895. And as you can see from these pictures, stereotypes justify violence against women. Here instead are some advertisements where people on the streets enjoyed writing horrible comments. Stereotypes minimize the seriousness of violence at home or outside. Prejudice that we define a cultural cage present in society lead to don't take violence seriously, preventing women from talking about it, impede adequate help. Victimization of women continues in the unbalanced and stereotyped narrative re-victimization and communication. Stereotypes of violence are based on misinterpretation of the causes and consequences of violence and often lead to a reversal of responsibility. This shifts the focus away from the real responsibility, leads to the isolation of the victim and increases the danger to the victim. So today's goals and aims are the dynamics of violence, the approach to the woman victim of violence, types of violence. In the late 1970s, Leonore Walker describes the cycle of violence by identifying 3 stages: the construction of tension, the explosion of violence, and the honeymoon. Here maybe it's easier because it's in Italian, the spiral of violence. So, how is a violent relationship structured? Gradually through isolation and devaluation of the woman. Quarrels that become increasingly frequent and aggressive. Episodes erupt for trivial reasons and after the climax of violence are followed by apologies, repentance, and reconciliation. The man promises the woman that he will never do it again. Thus begins a period in which the woman regains faith in the relationship, minimizes the seriousness of the situation, and hides her discomfort from the outside world and from herself. Violence doesn't appear suddenly. There is a gradual transition from domination to violence. We cannot talk about raptus. So we have the cycle of violence that has 4 repeating phases, stages. The spiral, the tension phase, the attack phase, apology phase, reconciliation phase. The danger for the woman is greater in each stage and in each cycle. The results of several research studies confirm that violence against women is a very submerged phenomenon. In fact, more than 90% of cases are confined within a disarming silence. 1 in 3 women in the world has suffered some form of physical, psychological, or sexual violence at the hands of men. In Italy, 1 woman in 3 aged between 16 and 74 has suffered at least 1 episode of violence during her lifetime. Here you have history of violence from an interview with a woman victim of violence. In October 2001, I started a relationship with Mr. L. The first 6 months, the relationship with L was smooth, peaceful. He was very kind and nice to me. He was very attentive to everything. At the end of 2002, the relationship with L started to become more and more difficult. He often had angry outbursts, scolded me, sometimes raised his voice and shouted at me. I don't know how it was possible, but I started to think with his head, to see the world through his eyes. Even scarier was the fact that all this was happening in the couple, at work, at school. It was always me, at least in appearance. I was afraid of going mad. After this incident, June 2004, I decided to live in because the situation had become untenable for me. And when the woman talks about incident, is talking about violence. In August 2004, we got back together because he was going to psychotherapy and I hoped he would solve his problems. He apologized, he cried, he promised me that he would that he would change and we would be happy again. Sorry. I felt I was absorbed by him. I don't know how it was possible, but I started to think with his head, to see the world with his eyes. My daily routine was organized with the only purpose of not making him angry. I know him. I know how to keep him quiet. I can predict when he will get angry. He's bad, but he's a genius. You don't understand. You don't know him. He can convince anyone that it's my fault and that I'm crazy. He's able to convince the judge that nothing is true. And this is what a woman victim of violence thinks that can do to control the situation and bad and good mood of the abuser. Here you have this link to watch this video, Recognizing Violence. What does a woman who suffers domestic violence feel? A big sense of inadequacy and shame that makes them confused, unable to ask for help. She closes herself in silence, feeling guilty. Violence is a fatality in their lives. Women experience the failure of a bond in which they have invested and which is the most important bond in their lives. They think they are not worthy of love. They think they only deserve violent men. Violence as destiny. They think that they are not that they are the only ones in this situation. They are ashamed and they think no one can understand them. They are angry with themselves and they are confused. They are inadequate both as wives and as mothers. They are unable to cope with life without their abuser. Reacting to violence means causing their children suffer. They don't recognize the abuse suffered, which, by the way, never happens in public. They express positive emotions for the abuser is the only entity in a world apart. Violence must be recognized as such not only by the victims, but also by those who witness it. Who and what is encountered during an interview with a woman victim of violence? Operator, who is always a woman, violence. So we have woman, violence, operator. The interview with the operators of the anti-violence centers is based on the practice of welcoming, listening, and suspending judgment. The operator of anti-violence centers is a very specific professional figure, must know the dynamics of violence against women as an interpersonal and cultural phenomenon, as well as a legal one. Figure who recognizes the effects of violence. It's a bridge between women and institution. Collaborates daily with lawyers for legal proceedings. And it's really important, the relationship between women. If it was important for the women to recover the relationships lost due to the abuser's control over their friendship and parental bonds and relationships, equally significant is the network of relationships they were able to build during the process of coming out of the violence itself. And this concerns both the workers of the anti-violence center and the other women who have gone through the same kind of experience. The woman's drive from within to get out of violence is therefore, except in a few cases, a path made of doubts, rethinking, maturing, counseling, epiphanies. It comes out as a fundamental condition for women to move forward, even if with difficulties. The meeting with the right operator, the social worker, and the policewoman trained to support her at the precise moment. And it's very, very important being believed and to be welcomed. How to help a woman? The call for help is encrypted. Usually a woman says, I don't eat anymore, I feel dizzy, I can't do things anymore, I feel confused. My son doesn't eat anymore. He has become very aggressive. He hits the wall, he bites his classmates. The woman needs external help to get out of it. So step 1, identifying the violence. how you fell into this trap. Stop blaming yourself, regaining or finding a good self-image. It's not useful to increase the gender gap, and it's very useful to fight the sexist mentality. It is useful to help women to recognize the signs of domestic violence and not to be passive. Ensure confidentially and provide clear information. Seeking and activating internal and external resources and inclusion in the social network and services. Networking with other professionals like the security forces, social services, and anti-violence centers association is really, really important. So thank you for your attention. I hope this lesson will help you to recognize violence and to have some extra tools to help you find your way in society, and also to help perhaps women or girls who are experiencing or have experienced violence. One more important thing, remember that violence is not a destiny, that is not the woman with her attitudes or with her clothes that causes abuse or violence, but that an act of violence is always a choice. So see you soon for a more equal world. Thank you. Bye.